So welcome everyone. I see a few of you starting to come in. My name is Andrea and I'm delighted to be here with Katya and Scylla, who are the trip leaders for this upcoming trip, one-of-a-kind spiritual and cultural immersion journey to the stunning highlands of Guatemala that is happening November 6th through 18th. So as I mentioned, we are here with the two trip leaders, and they're going to give us all of the details about the trips and have an opportunity for you to ask any questions. If you have any questions during the time of the webinar, you can go ahead and put it into the chat box or the Q&A box, and we'll make sure to get to them. And if you're having any technical difficulties, you can also chat us as well. But what's great to be on the call with you all, and I think let's just dive right in. So first, I'd love just to introduce Katya, who is the IONS Education Director, and then she'll also introduce Scylla, and we'll get going. So thank you guys, and go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Andrea, and welcome everyone. It's absolutely so exciting for me to be able to share this moment with Scylla. For those of you who have traveled with us in the past, when Carol Angermeyer still had the cross-cultural journeys, you know how special these journeys are. And as of 4 years ago, for those of you who don't know, Scylla acquired the company, and I am so thrilled that we're going to be able to collaborate and continue these beautiful journeys together. And one of the things that I love is the alignment that she brings with her to all the things, that we actually have here at IONS. She, as part of her background, is her intercultural consciousness training, and Scylla has such a passion for travel, for the people, for the cultures that she encounters. So for her, it is not a job. That's what I would like to say. It's something that she feels in her heart, and something she can actually share with all the travelers. So I look forward to having her share her photographs today from our trip to Guatemala and explain a little bit more in detail where we will be going and why this mystical journey is so exciting. But I would like to begin by describing what is the difference between this journey, for example, and so many other journeys that are being offered out in the world. And in my opinion, I think that this journey is for people who are seeking to connect with each other and the people of the culture they are visiting, which we do through meaningful conversations and sharing meals and visiting NGOs, visiting the special places that the locals are living their lives every single day. And on top of it is totally aligned to our IONS educational experiential programs, everything from mind body and interconnectedness, our intercultural wisdom, the worldview explorations program, conscious aging, and lots more. So it's an easy transition, I think, from us taking care of not only the beauty and a part of the outer journey, but also the inner journey. And so I can think of three top points that excited me when I first started taking these trips. One was indeed the exploration of my inner journey. The next one was, how do we engage as travelers with curiosity and inquiry? So we can ask a lot of questions, and we are so present during the journeys that it totally transforms the way we experience everything we do. And of course, in my opinion, the bigger umbrella of these journeys is really the spiritual and cultural immersion. So it's not just experiential, we totally immerse ourselves into that experience from day to day. And I will never forget, one of the first trips I took with cross-cultural journeys was in Cuba. And Wilfred and Carol told us to get lost. And it was such a surprise to everybody, saying, well, what do you mean you want us to get lost? And I think what they really meant, it was lose ourselves into the beauty of the places we were visiting, allowing really ourselves to savor every moment of everything that was happening, instead of rushing about and saying, oh, thank goodness I did 10 things today. Is so much more than that. Is truly stepping into every experience and allowing ourselves to take it all in and ask questions and be curious, and really consciously pay attention to all our senses. And it's so incredible when you're in a beautiful place and you allow yourself to use all your senses to be able to listen deeply and to smell your surroundings and to savor the incredible food that we are blessed to be able to share, and to see the architecture and to touch the textiles. How much more fun can it get? So with that in mind, one of the things that we like to do when we talk about immersing ourselves into it, we do things like having meaningful conversations about what we experience. How does that affect the way we feel? How does that shift our worldview about what we thought this culture was about and how we are now experiencing in real time? We also have regular check-ins and meditation practices. And the visits, for me, that's one of my favorite things, when I actually have a chance to have conversations with the people who live there and listen to their stories. And isn't that the one thing that connects all of us, regardless of what culture we come from? We all have a story to share. And once we make the time to truly listen, it changes that relationship instantly. So as you can see, it's not simply we design a trip and you know where you'll be staying and you know what you'll do every day. Is so much more than that. Is the unexpected magic moments, is what I call them, when something might happen, even though we have an agenda and we have a plan, that makes all the difference. And so the best way I can describe it is when you sign on, you have to be willing to come with an open mind and an open heart, and your willingness to shift your perspective in terms of the experience that you're about to begin on in any one of the journeys. So with that, because I want to make sure that Sila has plenty of time to share more of the details of the trip to Guatemala, I am so thrilled to introduce her to all of you. And Sila, you have the floor and take us on this magical journey.
Alrighty, thank you so much, Katya, for that. Setting the bar pretty high there for me. I am really truly appreciative of IONS and Katya for inviting me to do this webinar today and share some of our slides and pictures. This is just a fraction of what I have from the trip that we did last year in November. So this, I just want to say too, that this will be the second of the journeys to Guatemala that we've been doing. And I'm very thrilled to be leading it together with Katya. So I know that we have some time. We're going to spend probably about 20 minutes or so to go over some of these pictures and talk a little bit about the itinerary itself. And then we will leave maybe 10 minutes or so at the end for question and answer. And I believe that there is, the host will come back in and let us know how we can type in some questions, and we will field some of those at the end of the webinar. Okay? So I hope that you all can hear me okay and see the pictures. So the first thing I wanted to do is just answer the question, so why Guatemala and why the Mayan people? So I have a very personal connection to Guatemala. It started about 12 years ago when I first visited Guatemala, and my husband and I were on an exploration to adopt a child. And we had not planned to adopt internationally, but we ended up in Guatemala with a friend who was writing a book about Guatemalan adoption. And we ended up on this beautiful lake in the Guatemalan highlands. And I totally fell in love with the country and the place and the people. And we were introduced to a woman in Antigua who ran a beautiful little children's home. And the rest is history. A year later, we adopted our son from there. So that's kind of my personal connection to it. And I can tell you a lot more about that if and when I see you. But that's how I ended up there. I actually lived in Guatemala for almost a year at that time in 2007. So I lived in Antigua for bulk of that time and fostered my son until the adoption was done and we can come back home. So ever since I got back home with him, I had sort of a yearning to go back, and it was like something almost like a magnet that drew me back. And in 2012, when he was 5, we went back for the winter, and we went to the lake, to Lago Atitlan, which is about 3 hours from Antigua, and we stayed in a little village on the shores, and he attended a Waldorf school. He's a Waldorf child, for those of you who know that education. There's one Waldorf school in the entire Central America, and it's in this little village on the lake. So we placed him there for a couple of months, and we returned the next year. So, and that's when I was living there that I really started to have a sense of what the Mayan people are about and what they were about once upon a time. I started learning a lot about the Mayan calendar. Of course, this was around 2012. Some of you might have heard of or studied the Mayan calendar and know that there was a sort of pivotal moment in December of 2012. Some people would call it the end of the world. The Mayans would call it the beginning of a new consciousness era. And what that means, we won't go into it today, but we would explore that when we go down there. So if you look at the world right now, there's a lot of, they would call it also the truth times. So the times of truth are coming out. So things are being sort of turned inside out, and we are looking at what's real as opposed to what's not real. And the Mayans are slowly, particularly in this area around Lake Atitlan, they're coming back. For those of you who've read history, you know that Guatemala went through a close to 40-year civil war that completely basically took away their rights to practice their Mayan traditions, like their fire ceremonies and sweat lodges and other rituals. And they were basically told to, come into on the other side, and many of them became evangelical Christians and were only able to practice some of these old Mayan traditions in their home and for risk of persecution. So this is, of course, now a little bit in the past. The war is over, but there is still lingering problems for the Mayan people. The people that I've connected with in Guatemala are the ones who are kind of leading a new charge in finding a new way for them to come back. So I would call it sort of the rise of a new Mayan person in this beautiful place. And it should be mentioned too that more than 70% of Guatemala's population are Mayan or would identify as Mayan, as opposed to Latinos who are a mix, or mestizos who are a mix of people from Spanish heritage and Mayan, and of course some African influence as well. But when we say Mayan, we mean the indigenous population. My son happens to be 100% Mayan. He's from a very rural part of Guatemala in Baja Verapaz. So that's just a little bit of the background of kind of me and why I came to it. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the journey itself. I connected with a little organization in San Pedro, which is on this lake, called Tapit. And it is an organization that is founded and rooted in the Mayan traditions and culture. And it teaches children between the ages of 6 or 7 into teens about the old ways and then sort of the indigenous and native ways of caring for the the lake in this case, and nature and the environment, something that was completely lost during the time of the war, certainly, and even prior to that. And so what they've done in this particular organization is they have interviewed about 90 elders around the lake, and then they've taken those interviews, surveys, and fed it to educators, a couple of educators in this village, and they have turned it into curriculum for children. And so they do that alongside teaching them computer skills. And we're talking really basic, rudimentary, like how to turn the computer on. So it's a really beautiful way to turning the old traditions and kind of marrying them with new technology, and making sure that the children that are 10, even 10 and younger, are going to grow up in a culture and in a community and an environment where they feel included, and where they feel that they can learn something and they can contribute to their own children. Because for a long time they were, the second class, and I would argue that by and large they still, many people feel that they are, even though they're the majority of the population, many of them, a majority of those people live on less than $2 a day. So there's dire straits, poverty. So what we're going to do with this journey is to really go in, and we're going to visit with this organization. They're one of our hosts when we're on the lake, and they're going to show us and tell us a little bit about what they do and how they do it. So I'm just going to go back here and show some slides. I'm going to go back, sorry, just a second here. So this is me back in, so the blonde girl in the center there with a little child in her lap, that's me. And this is back in 2007 when I first arrived. I was working with some Mayan women in a community in Tecpan, and we did a little textile exchange with the United States. So we had a few donors, and we got a very nice connection with this community in Tecpan. These were mostly families who had been displaced after Hurricane Stan when that went through Guatemala in 2006. And the woman who is laughing on the left side there, she's my friend Zulis, who will be actually helping us with one of the fire ceremonies that we're going to experience in Antigua when we first arrived. This is my son when we first were there the second time we were there in 2012 when he was in kindergarten. So this is on the dock in San Marcos. So this is just a little bit of the sort of scenescape that you will be able to experience. These docks are in every single village. We will be going up and down these docks and jumping in and out of what they call lanchas, which are these boats that take us across. This is in the Waldorf School, so this is a little circle. This is an intercultural learning center as well, and we're going to have a chance to visit with them. They're also very excited to have us come visit there, and we can even maybe spend a whole day with them. Last year we just went for a quick afternoon visit, but my plan is to include this a little bit more. They are also having support for the indigenous Mayan children in these communities, and they mix it with expat kids, in this case in San Marcos in this particular village. And it's a beautiful combination to see the children from abroad coming in and actually having an interaction with the children who they probably otherwise never would be able to share with. We're going to start the journey, however, in Antigua. So this is where we're first going to land. And for those of you who don't know what this is actually part of a procession during Semana Santa. So this shows you also, of course, that Guatemala has a very strong Catholic influence. I would say that that's the biggest thing that you will experience when you come to Antigua. The Spanish colonial architecture, of course, combined with large, very majestic cathedrals, the cobblestone streets and the beautiful, if some of you may not have been there, but if you've been to Oaxaca, Mexico, it's not dissimilar from that. So it is a World Heritage Site in the UN. So they cannot build anything taller than 3 stories in Antigua. So I'm not going to go into too much to that. We're going to see that when we arrive. The first thing we're going to do one of the first things we're going to do the first couple of days is have a fire ceremony. And this is just an altar that is by the site where the fire ceremony takes place. We typically do the fire ceremony either early in the morning or late at night, depending on the size of this group and whether we're going to divide us into several batches. We'll have to see depending on how many people we get. The same with our sweat lodge that we're going to have on the same day or potentially the day after. But we will have a sweat lodge and a fire ceremony the first couple of days to sort of set us up for the trip ahead. So this is just a Mayan fire. They do not use wood. They use candles and other incense and things of that nature to get these fires started. And they just keep going and going, and they're putting more things on them. So that's just something we're going to get to see when we go there. This is a beautiful little, this is the patio of the restaurant where we were having our lunch, and this is very high up outside of Antigua. So this is one of the first days right before we went into our sweat lodge. And there's our Mayan friend Zula's in the middle, and we picked herbs for the sweat lodge experience in her herb garden. So this is a very happy this is a few people in our group from last fall. Here we're very happy picking herbs. And then after Antigua, we will make our way to the lake. As I said, it's about a 3-hour trip. And it's the closer you get to the lake, the sort of more mountains you will see. And most of that is volcanic. So the lake, it is situated a mile above sea level. It is a large crater, and it's towered by 3 volcanoes in the background. So you have 3 volcanoes. For those of you who are, if there are any hikers in the group, there might be a chance to hike one of the volcanoes, which is absolutely spectacular. And you can go up there and see the sunrise in the morning. For people who are active and want to do something kind of on their own, that would be a very nice thing to do. Switchbacks roads to get us down to Panajachel, where we take the boat to where we're going to go. The roads are, I would say, very good here compared to some other Latin American countries. This is a very good road from Antigua to the lake, so no problem there. Here you can see the stunning beauty of this lake. It's a little bit breathtaking, actually, when you come around the bend there, and it just goes on and on and on. And on a clear day, you can see even farther away than the lake is. So this is really beautiful. This is some of our travelers from last year. Shelley there in the front. I'm not sure if she's on the webinar today, but Shelley's an IONS member, and she is excited that we're going to do this trip again. And this is her first time to the lake. And here we have arrived to the boat. And so this is what we can look like when we climb down into this boat. So they do have, as you can see, they have life jackets, so that's not an issue there. Here's Shelley and Angela and Kathy on the boat as we're on our first, this is before we took off. The lake is, and this is actually what you can see. So just to, a quick note here about luggage, right? So you can certainly bring a suitcase, but it's even better to maybe bring a backpack, like a sturdy backpack, because we do throw around things a little bit in these boats. So pack light and smart, and not too bulky, and certainly not 2 or 3 suitcases, because that would be difficult. And those logistics, of course, we're going to go through all of that. For those of you who sign up for the trip, we'll go through every single little thing like that closer to it. It's just a quick reminder. And this is our one of our hosts from Tapit, from the organization I was talking about. His name is Manuel, and Kirsten. Yeah, she was actually Swedish. I forgot to say that I'm actually Swedish native. I am not American. And Kirsten is one of our travelers from last year, and she's also Swedish. And she came all the way from Mallorca, Spain, to join us. And we may hear more from her in the future. We have a potential trip to visit her in Mallorca, maybe next year. So we will let you know about that. More trips from picture from the boat and the lake. And this is right around sunset time. And you can see that the lake is not particularly rough pardon me, the lake is tends to get a little bit rough in the afternoon, but has it calms down typically in the morning, and the sort of afternoon, evening, it is calm. So we just watch it. So when we go out on the boat, we make sure that we know what the weather is going to do. This is just another stunning view from one of the locations where we'll have classes and learn about tapit. So this is called Hummingbird Heaven. Again, depending on the size of the group, we might have an opportunity to stay at Hummingbird Heaven and have space for about 15 beds there. But if we have a very large group, we will find other accommodations around San Pedro and also in Panachal. So we will keep you updated on that. This is just the view from where I was staying. I was living on this terrace when we were there. So here are the children of Tapit from one of the first nights that we were there. They did a beautiful performance for us. And you can see there the traditional dress. So this is, if you have not been to Central America or Guatemala, you may not know that they have pretty much as many dresses as there are villages in the country, right? So every village has their own, in this case for the girls, it's called a corte, which is the skirt, and then a huipil or a blouse as the top. And they follow a particular pattern. And you can see here that the boys are matching the girls, and the boys also, in this particular case, the boys have pants, which is not very usual anymore. Men typically don't carry as many traditional clothing as women. But here in San Pedro, which is in Santiago, where we're going to visit as well, it's still fairly common. And these are just the little boys. These kids are about between 8 and 12 years old. And that's the teacher there in the background with the glasses. And Manuel is giving us a little overview of the program. So we will spend about roughly 3 full days, give or take, depending on the schedule and how we can accommodate everything with Tapit. And what that means is that we're going to go up both into the village and learn what the children are doing in their after school program and go to their little studio. And we will also have an opportunity to go out with some of the farmers and see how they are caring for the land up in the mountains and what they're doing to actually work towards a really sustainable community where they're bringing back some of these practices to a municipal level as well. So Manuel here has been very involved with the city of San Pedro with some of the initiatives that this organization is doing. And these are the parents, some of the parents of the kids. And here they are again. And then we just spend time hanging out together, and we share, stories between kids and adults. And we drink a little wine here and there, known to happen as well, which is important. We find the best wine we can. Wine is not one of Guatemala's strong cards, but we'll do our best to find some good bottles for those who drink wine. This is sunrise, so I put these pictures in here because it's a stunning view over the lake in all kinds of lights. So I just wanted to get a little glimpse of that. This is after sunrise. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to visit some of the cooperatives around the lake and learn from what they're doing. This is completely natural dyes. These are yarns. So this is a weaving cooperative that's run by women in San Juan, which is just about 10 minutes from San Pedro. And we'll go and learn from this woman. This girl is actually married to an American in this case. And I think she's also lived in the US, and she speaks very good English. In other situations where we have, like Manuel, for example, does not speak English, but we will have interpreters. And in some cases, they only speak Tzutzujil. Some people, of course, Spanish is the majority language in Guatemala, but in some of these traditional villages where they only speak their Mayan language, there are 21 languages in Guatemala that are considered different Mayan dialects or languages. And in San Pedro, they speak Tzutzujil. And just across the lake in San Marcos, where I live, they speak Cachiquel. So just 10 minutes apart, they speak 2 different languages. So we're going to learn a little bit about that too. But as I said, this girl speaks English and Spanish and Tzutzunil, and she's going to show us exactly how they do sort of from start to finish as they're making the yarn and then dyeing the yarn as well. And then she will show us a little bit how they weave on a backstrap loom. So those are just some of the things that we will be experiencing, among others. This is another picture of one of the volcanoes. There are two volcanoes right behind San Pedro. I believe this is Volcan San Pedro. There's also Volcan Santiaguito and Toliman are the other two volcanoes. And you can see here how some of the agriculture, what they've used for many years is what's called slash and burn agriculture, where they burn it down, and then it's been a little difficult for environmental purposes and reasons. They put a lot of pesticides on the land, and what they're trying to do now is to introduce a more sustainable farming practices, and that's what this organization is doing. So we'll learn a lot about that. You see there the kind of the clear cuts. We'll go to Santiago, which is another traditional village on the lake. Some of you may know the author Martin Prechtel, and once you have signed up for the trip, we will send out a book book list that we recommend. And Martin Prechtel lived in Santiago for many, many years. He's an American from New Mexico, who's adopted into the Mayan community in Santiago. And his ex-wife is actually one of our guides in Santiago, and she'll take us around and show us and tell us the stories, some of the stories of Martin, and also the traditional stories of Mashimon in this case, which is one of the saints that the Mayans are worshipping here. So they give him rum and cigars and cigarettes and little coins and things of that nature. And here is another, so you will see this blend of sort of Mayan traditions with more traditional Catholic and evangelical Christian traditions, and that's kind of what you learn when you're there. It's like how do they differ from each other? This is Kirsten, who is purchasing one of these gorgeous huipiles. This was a hand embroidered huipil, and she was spending, I think, an hour in there, if not more, talking to them about the price and about how it's made and about how it should be sewn. And it was a great thing. So there's a lot of nice little shopping to be done there too, if you're interested in that. And what we do is we stay away from those tourist places, to the extent it's possible. So we go to, the places that are recommended by the locals, and we go sort of into the back rooms and get a good conversation going, and that's more important than the actual purchase itself. Right? So here we are with our Mayan hosts again in another location close to Santiago, visiting a beautiful, it's sort of a restoration project, if you will, of some of the old Mayan. There's some, you see the thatched roof there in the background. So they have actually built up a place to look kind of the way it looked before the conquistadors came in, and so we get to learn a little bit from what it looked sort of in the olden Mayan days, and this is an absolutely fascinating project. They also have a lot of different vegetation around there. That's nice to learn about. We'll learn about how they roast their coffee and cook their tortillas, and we're going to have an amazing meal there. It's a four-course meal at this place. I believe this is sweet potato and rice, and it's a very traditional Mayan dish. So you will find how different that is than the kind of traditional rice and beans, which is, of course, there's plenty of that as well, and all of it is just very delicious. This is the woman who runs that place together with her son. Her son was born in Guatemala and is tall and blonde and speaks Tzutzunil as his first language. So this girl is actually from Bainbridge Island, where I live, and she and her whole family have spent a good part of the last 40 years down there. And her son is married to a Guatemalan woman, and it's sort of a cultural blended family, and it's a great story to hear their project that they did there. We'll learn from these elders as well. This is one of the oldest women in that community. And she's showing us how to tie her hair. and lots of beauty, lots of flowers and beautiful things, lots of good vistas. I think some other good wine here, some homemade wine that they make at this place, which is some of the best wine I've had in a long time. And yes, the sun sets again. I mean, you can't say enough about this lake and how beautiful it is. We're back actually now to 2000. It was actually 2012 when I lived there. So this is another place that, if it's still there, you never know if it's going to be open or not, but if it's still there, we can get a little refuge into this gorgeous hot tub and pool area, which is in a sort of an expat community on one side of the lake. So that's another place we can go and have a good meal and rest for a day. And here is a beautiful Mayan woman on the boat. I just love that picture so much. And they're covering themselves for the splashing of the water that's coming in when it's a windy day. The water splashes a bit, and she's protecting her little boy there. And that's actually me on the ruins of Tikal. So we are going to go to Tikal. That's going to kind of the punctuate the trip. And that's the last 3 or 4 nights we will spend in Tikal, which is the ruins of the north. And you may have seen recently that they have uncovered, or they haven't actually uncovered, but they have discovered, I should say, that there is a lot more to this city of Tikal than they ever thought. So with some new laser type cameras, they've been able to identify the ruins going, I'm exactly not sure how much wider it is, but it goes both down and wide. So I don't think they're going to excavate it, but it just shows you how much bigger the Mayan culture was than they ever imagined. So they're now kind of rewriting the history books a little bit. And this just recently happened, right, kind of after we were there, and that this was publicized in the news, and we'll learn a lot more about that when we get there. And in closing, I just want to show this gorgeous picture here, some pictures from Tikal. This is the sun is setting over the ruin there. This is one of the most famous ruins in Tikal. So that's kind of all I had from the slides, and I could say a lot more, but I think I may be running out of time.
Great. Well, thank you so much. It's actually perfect timing. And I do want to invite anyone who is on the call can go ahead and type their questions in the Q&A box. And I will just see what questions, and it can be anything. It can be logistical, it could be about the journey itself, so any questions at all that you might have. If you would like, you can also raise your hand, and I can allow you to talk, so you can unmute, we'll unmute you, and you can ask your question if you'd rather ask in person. So I'll just give it a moment to see if we have any questions coming in here. And again, it's just on the bottom bar. If you put the main bar on the bottom, you'll see a Q&A box and a raise hand. I just want to make sure everyone knows that. And so we don't have any questions coming in yet, but if you'd like to, oh, here we go. Would a gluten-free diet be a problem?
No. Good question. I actually am a little gluten sensitive myself, and that is not a problem. You can have rice, you can have, I don't know if you're sensitive to corn too, but most of the tortillas that we eat there are corn flour, and that's typically not an issue. So lots of protein, lots of vegetables, lots of fruit. So actually not too much wheat at all or other grains.
Awesome. And Elliot is asking, how long is the total trip?
So the total trip is 12 days, but we like to say 2 weeks. Luckily, we don't have to go through many weeks. When we go to Guatemala, basically go straight south, depending on where you are in the U.S. But the maximum time difference would be about 2 hours, I think, unless you're in Hawaii. I think it's a little more. But the reason I'm saying that is that you may want to take time on either side and do something else, right? So you may want to come in a couple of days early, or you may want to leave a little late, or you may want to take some time and go off on your own and go to the beach. And I just want to make sure that you know that that's totally possible and doable. This trip does not include airfare, so it's up to you how you get there, as long as you show up for the tour when it begins, and we'll send out all information about that.
Awesome. Awesome. And we have Kurt saying, is the trip limited to a certain number of people?
Well, that's a really good question, and I would say that's kind of a good problem to have if we get to that point where we say, well, gee, this is starting to get too much. I would say that the sweet spot is 18. Last year we had, I think, a total with myself, we had 11 people. It was a small journey. We also meet with people when we're down there, so we have to take that into account, because we want to make sure that we are comfortable. As far as travelers, I wouldn't, if you're even thinking about joining us, I would not delay it too much, because we already have a few people signed up, and I think we're going to fill pretty quickly. I should mention too, since we're on that topic, that we have an early bird discount of $100 off until the end of April. So if you want to sign up, the total trip cost will be deducted by $100 if you sign up before the end of the month. And the earlier the better, because then we know and we can plan accordingly. And I would say 15 to 18 is ideal. If we get above 20, we will revisit the question of whether that's too many or not. But it's a nice small size group.
Awesome. Awesome. That looks like the questions at this moment. So maybe if you have any closing comments, and I'll just chime in if we have someone else that asks a question in the next couple minutes. But for now, that's the questions that people have.
Katja, do you have anything you want to say?
The only other thing I would like to share with the group is, from the moment the travelers decide to sign up for this and join the trip, that's when it all begins. It's not really when we arrive at that specific in Guatemala. It's going to start with some experiences and some things that we are going to share with you prior to the trip, and of course, ultimately, our goal is, once you connect with one another on the trip, during the trip, which happens in a beautiful way, is to also stay connected after the journey. So in a sense, we're creating a community that shares an experience that is transformative and powerful, and we don't want that community to disperse. And of course, it's optional. It's not a requirement, but our experience has been that people have really started friendships, and they wanted to stay connected afterwards. What do you think, Zilla? Anything else?
Yeah, I think that's great. And what we did last year, actually, on that note, and we can check with the participants, the travelers, but we created a little Facebook group that was a closed group. It's a private group for only for us, and we can stay connected in that way. And of course, for people who want to, they can share their email addresses and stay connected that way. And also, I would say, with the Mayan people that we meet and the hosts down in San Pedro in this case, and also Tzules in Antigua, you make kind of lifelong friends with them. And it is, like Carol would say, the beginning of a long relationship, and you have an ability to help, if you feel so inclined, to support this organization down there, because we should maybe mention that a very small, a small portion of the trip fee goes to actually help them, obviously, because they're putting together a program for us, and it's a way to they can always use support in all kinds of ways. And that's typically what happens to many of the people on our trip last year, are still maintaining a friendship and relationship with Tapi down there.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I just have one final question that came in to say, what kind of ground transportation? So if you could just answer that quickly before the end of our
time. We're going to ride on the roof of the chicken buses. No. We're going to be actually traveling. We're not going to travel on the chicken buses. For those of you who don't know what chicken buses are, they're old refurbished American buses. So, and they are many of them down there, and we do not choose to travel on those for a variety of reasons. We go typically on in these 15-seaters Volkswagen buses, And they're very modern, and they all have seat belts, or we request that they have seat belts. And so we may have 2 or 3 of those depending on how many we are, but those are the ones that we hire. And I worked with that company even when I was there 12 years ago, and they were very reliable, and they're always on time. And I like them a lot, so we'll just choose that.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I just want to say thank you, everyone who has joined here on this webinar with us today, and to Scylla and Katja, thank you so much for giving this peek into the experience, this extraordinary experience to go to Guatemala and to be with the Mayan people. And so we will be sending out a follow-up email with more links and the special discount that Scylla also mentioned that we have available now. And feel free to email us with any questions that you have regarding the trip. We're really here to answer and be along with you this whole journey and this decision and coming into the journey into Guatemala. Do you have any last things that you, Scylla or Katja, want to say?
I was gonna say that. So just look for the note for follow-up from the webinar, where you can have a link to the itinerary. So if you haven't looked at the itinerary yet, it's already posted. It's been posted for a couple of months, and it gives you more of the day-by-day outline of exactly what we're going to be doing, what's included, what's not included, and all those sorts of things. And certainly if you have any questions at all, you can also call me directly, and I will be very happy to talk to you about it. So I just wish everybody would join us.
Here, I think it's going to be an amazing journey. And if you do have any questions about even some of the details of what we do as we explore not only the culture, but also our own inner journey, feel free to write to us, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. And I promise you it will be quite an experience. So please join us. it will be very exciting to see you all. Take good care and stay in touch.
Beautiful. Goodbye, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.